Hi, I'm Mercedes Pfab here at the Captured on Canvas studio. Welcome to Picture This. For today's painting, picture this. It's a late evening and a couple taking a stroll through the park under their umbrella. The lampposts are shining their light and reflecting water onto the ground and dancing vibrant colors throughout the trees. Before we get started, let's make sure we have everything in front of us. Most importantly, on our easel, a blank 16 by 20 canvas. With the colors, I'm going to be using a ton today. We have black, white, ultramarine blue, primary yellow, primary red, and a raw sienna or golden yellow is what I like to call it. For the paintbrushes, I'm going to be using these three. The large flat tip, that medium angular brush, and last but not least, the tiny round tip. And don't forget a cup of water and paper towels for cleaning those brushes. To get started, I'm going to start with the background. So I'm going to start with my largest square tip brush and just starting to build up the layers. I'm going to start with a nice soft blue throughout the middle, going to that ultramarine blue, and then we're going to start working on the ground. I'm going to start with mixing that lighter blue with a big scoop of white on my palette, at least the size of a quarter. I always like to mix more than I think I'm going to need, so I don't have to remix it. I'm going to take a little bit of that primary blue and mix that in to make it a nice light sky blue color. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and start with that horizon line. It's going to be about halfway up on my canvas. So I'm just going to start with a line all the way across. And then I'm going to flick my brush back and forth all the way across, and I'm going to take this up about halfway here to the top of that canvas. About halfway up. I'm not even going to clean my brush. I'm just going to dip right into that white. And I'm going to take white right over top of this light blue. Sounds funny painting a white canvas white, but it's going to help us get this blended before we go into that ultramarine. And then I'm going to overlap with that light blue all the way across. So we have a nice soft transition between the white and that sky blue. Now, once again, not even cleaning my brush, dipping right into that ultramarine. And I'm going to start right above the white, all the way across. And then I'm going to overlap that white while it's still wet to get that nice blend. The more and more you go back and forth, the more and more it's going to be blended. Once you got that blend, we'll just continue that color all the way to the top. We're actually going to continue with this color and start adding a little bit to the ground. We're going to take that ultramarine and start building up the ground to the left and the right where I want my path. So I think it's nice to just kind of draw out where I'm going to have my path. I'm going to have the top of my path somewhere over here. So I'm just going to have it curve, and as it comes closer, it's going to get larger and wider. So I'm just going to, you can just sketch it. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. Kind of coming down towards this left corner here. You go a few inches over, have this curve going this way, down to the bottom. Then I'm going to take long brush strokes left and right, filling in that ground to the left and to the right of that path. continue with the background, but we're going to make sure we clean off this brush. Just gently stirring it in your cup of water, wiping it on the sides, and repeat. Now a pretty simple step. We're just going to take a little bit of that black and color in our path. So basically going right over where those lines were, the left and the right, and then coloring in all of the middle there. Once again, just going back over, making sure we got a nice even coat. I don't like too many globs along the edges, so I try to smooth those out if I can. Now that we finished the path, we'll go ahead and clean off our brush, and while that dries, we'll take a little break. Welcome back to Picture This. Now that we have completed our background, we're going to start building up a little bit in the sky throughout the leaves of the trees. I'm going to be using my large square tip brush. I'm going to be just dancing between the colors. What's nice about it, you don't even have to clean your brush throughout. I'm going to start with just a little bit of white across the end of my brush and basically just making a bunch of X's. Wherever your hand goes, that's where the leaf will be. I'm going to start with just little dashes, kind of like little X's or back and forth movements here, going throughout that low sky background. I'm going to take this all the way across. And I might take it out maybe a couple inches. Sometimes this is where I like to glob on that paint, making some areas a little thicker and some areas a little thinner. Now I'm going to start working up into the colors of my trees. I'm going to just dip right into my primary yellow and do exactly the same thing, but overlapping some of those brush strokes with the white. It's going to give some variations of the yellow now. And now I might just dip right back into my white. I want to add more variations, overlapping. And you can see even those little streaks in there. Always gives it a cool look. You want to make sure you don't overdo this part, because we do want to see those variations of colors. If you keep going back over it, it's just going to all blend to be solid yellow. All right, so now I'm going to go into the red. Without even cleaning my brush, I'm going to dip right into the red. Even if there's a little bit of yellow, that's awesome because then we get a little bit of oranges. So I'm going to start right above the yellow, doing those X's to about halfway up from the top of the yellow to the top of the canvas. Wipe off some of that extra paint on my brush, and then I'm going to be going into that ultramarine just to blend that in with that background color and to darken that up a little bit because it was transparent. So I'm going to add some of that in there. Once again, the same thing. We're going to overlap some of these brush strokes, and then we're just going to take it to the top. A little bit of that sky blue from before. I might just wipe off my brush with all those dark colors in it. Use a little bit of that light sky blue to add a little bit more contrast in that blue area. So I just might dabble that in here and there. Not as much. As you can see, it stands out a lot more. And if you don't like how bright some of them are, I just go right back over them to blend them in with the background colors. You can even carry those throughout the red a little bit. And I always like to take a step back and look at it, make sure it's kind of balanced throughout. And once you're happy with it, we're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. All right, so we're going to continue now onto the ground. It's going to be back into the blending, not so much the brush strokes. We're going to kind of dance between a few colors again here. I'm going to start with making kind of a brown color. So I'm going to start with a big pile of that raw sienna, separate that, and add a little bit of black. Just kind of darken it up a little bit. And it kind of makes that brown color. I'm going to use wide brush strokes with this, just holding my brush standing up, flicking left and right, just like we did when we colored it in that ultramarine. I'm just going to add a little bit of that dirt color in throughout. We kind of want to cover the majority of that blue. Being that that color is behind it, it gives those colors a little bit more vibrant shades. Go back into my raw sienna, that golden yellow, and start blending that in some areas, adding some variations. And it's fun to add just a little bit of red on our brush and add a little bit of that in there. Again, long brush strokes all the way across. These colors still can be a little see-through, so at least we're not going to see those stop and start points with our brush strokes. And add a little bit over here. All right, while we're at it, we may as well just start a little bit on the path with a little bit of that reflection. It's basically going to be all the colors we used from above down onto the path, but we don't want to cover all of the black. I'm going to just wipe off my brush here. I'm going to start with a little bit of that raw sienna, that golden yellow, and I'm going to hold my brush horizontally. So when I go left and right, it's going to make nice thin brush strokes and very light pressure. I like to just flick my brush to the left and right so it just fades into that background. I'm just going to add a few lines over here, kind of going up in a line. And as they're up on that path, you might want to make them a little bit smaller because it is further away. It's going to add to the depth of our piece. I'm going to take a little bit of red, add that in some spots, kind of maybe between the yellow. Take a little bit of ultramarine. I kind of go right over the areas with the red, because if it blends a little bit, kind of gets you some cool purples. Start over there. So we're going to let this dry again. Make sure you clean your brush, and while that dries, we'll take a little break. Welcome back to Picture This. I'm going to continue here with the reflection on my path to brighten it up a little bit. I'm going to continue using that middle-sized angular brush, and I'm going to be using yellow. But I do know it's a very transparent color, so I do like to add some white to it. Since I want it to be bright, I'm going to take a big scoop of white off to the side, and then a good scoop of yellow and mix that in. I'm going to use the thin side of my brush, holding it horizontally, and just add little flicks left and right, just like we did before. wipe off my brush here and use a little bit of white. Add some more brighter reflection lines here. Kind of like to still focus over those yellow marks there, just kind of in between. You don't have to zigzag as much, just maybe a couple lines. Go back to our background a little bit. Let's start making those little happy trees in the back with kind of a light tan. I'm going to just continue using that brown I mixed before. I might actually mix a little bit more, just a little bit of yellow. I'm going to add that in. And you know what, this time I'm going to add a little bit of white to brighten it up. Kind of want them to be kind of hazy and subtle in the background. Just like that. Using that thin side of the brush, I'm just going to add just little twig lines there in the back, just near the horizon, and these are just going to disappear up into the yellow right underneath the red. Make some closer trees. This time I'm just going to use black to give it a little more contrast. Using that same brush and the black, I'm going to start down a little bit lower on my ground, kind of in the middle here. I kind of want to fill up any areas that I feel need to be filled up. So I'm going to come right in the middle here, drawing that big tree that goes all the way up to the top. And I'm going to actually make this one a little bit wider too, as it is closer. Maybe about a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch over. Going up and flying off in one direction. Now I'm just going to kind of follow from this right side and then angle up into this left branch here to finish off that branch. And same goes for this branch. I'm just going to add a little bit of thickness at the base. And then we can add a bunch of little branches. I think of them as Ys off of Ys. You don't want them going straight out, it just doesn't look as natural. So this one might have a curve to it. If you want them more whimsy, you can always kind of make them spiral a little bit. It's always kind of fun. We're just going to add those in wherever you feel you want to. Continue with that black. Now we're going to go down to detail down on the ground and even some lamppost. So I'm going to use the black and just start with outlining that path again. So it will pop out a little bit more. Thin side of the brush, just following down. And I just kind of like to make a little sketch lines. Coming down, then it doesn't have to be so refined. Gives it more that painterly look. I do that for both sides. All right, now I'm going to start with maybe a couple of lines through my ground as well. Holding it horizontally, just adding these little wavy lines. Ready to start those lampposts. These can be a little more nerve-wracking because they're a very straight line. But I'm going to still use that black, using that thin side of my brush. Sometimes I actually rest my pinky on the canvas as well. It kind of gives me that stability. So I'm just going to start maybe up here and just going up to the yellow. And as I come closer, I'm going to make them taller. So maybe in the middle here, being careful where I drag my finger, going up a little bit taller. And if you're more comfortable coming down, that's an option as well. Maybe I have one more over on this left side. And this is actually going to be a little bit taller each time. Then I'll add maybe just a couple on this side, kind of keeping them level to the heights here. So over here, probably making them the same height as this back one on the left. And that one on the middle, about the same height. And if he goes in front of the tree, that's okay. Once we put that little light bulb on there, he'll pop out again. Now I'm going to use my brush, the wide side, to add a little bit of a base. So maybe about an inch up, maybe on this guy here, just pulling down. So we don't even have to draw it out. We're just letting the brush do the work for us. This one, once again, a little bit taller. Same goes for back here. There we are. We're going to go ahead and clean off our brush. And to finish those lampposts, I'm going to be using the yellow actually to create the light bulbs. So with that tiny brush, I'm going to use actually that same bright yellow that I used down in my path. And circles are actually pretty easy when painting. I just start with a dot right in the middle of where I want that circle. So right above each one, about a ½ inch, I'm just going to start with a little dot. And in the middle of that, or starting from that dot, I'm going to spiral out until I get the size light that I want. So I'm going to go ahead and clean off my brush. I'm going to use black to finish those lampposts. So very light pressure. I'm just going to add a little design to the top. Might just be one little dot right up at the top and a little spiral going to the left and to the right. So I'm going to do that to each of my little lampposts here. Very light pressure. And one little dot. This guy's kind of in front of my tree. I'm still going to draw both sides because sometimes if that paint piles up a little bit, you can subtly see it once it dries even. So I'm going to finish with this guy here. Remember, making it a little bit bigger and that little dot at the top. All right, our final step is drawing that little couple on the path. People are always the most difficult, but I like to break it down to very geometric shapes. I'm going to draw the girl. She's just going to have a dress, triangle skirt or dress, and it's going to be somewhere here in the upper portion of my path, kind of in the middle, but maybe just a smidge to the right so I have room for the guy. I'm going to start with one dot where I'm going to have her waist. I'm just going to come down, drawing a triangle for her skirt and coloring it in. And we'll be adding some highlights to her at the end. So if she gets a little lost on the black path, that's okay. We'll bring it out a little bit. And we're going to draw an upside down triangle for her torso. Maybe a little bit smaller than the skirt. And we can also add a little bit of width in there. And then making sure we color in that. I'm going to make her legs pretty simple. It's just going to be basically like a line coming down. Maybe not as tall as her skirt. Making a little bit of width to it, coming down. Luckily it's all black, so we're not going to really notice this too much. And then we can start the guy. He's kind of got a triangle or a square figure. So kind of going straight over from her shoulder line there, maybe making him a little bit taller. Coming down, about the waistline there, completing that rectangle, coloring it in. And I can make his legs kind of just long, thinner triangles, centered underneath his body there, making his feet in line with hers. And coloring it in. All right, now we can work on our umbrella. I'm gonna just keep my brush. I'm just gonna darken some red. So taking this brush, I'm gonna take a big scoop of red, separating that on my palette, and then add a little bit of black until I get the desired red color. Kind of going for like a wine, maroon. The umbrella is just gonna be a rounded curve for the top and then that little scalloped bottom. So I'm going to start maybe about 2 inches above my people here. The dot right in the center of them. Then I'm going to arch down to the left and down to the right. And then across the bottom, just add that scallop. It's just like loop, loop, loop. You can do as many or as little as you want. You do want to make sure that they overlap your people. Otherwise, you will have to go back and add a little bit more to them. So now that I have that, I can just color it in. Once again, nice long brush strokes. Go ahead and clean off my brush. My final step, I'm just going to bring this out a little bit on my background just by making kind of like a medium to light gray. I'm going to use that tiny brush again, good scoop of white, a little bit of black, mixing that together. Got that medium gray. In light pressure, I'm just going to add subtle highlights to the sides of the figures and the umbrella. So maybe on her side there, side of the skirt. Could add a little wave across the bottom, even some wrinkles. And the same goes for him. Left side and maybe to the bottom of my umbrella and the top. Just very light pressure. Sometimes the quicker you go, the more natural to look. There we are. I'm going to go ahead and clean my brush and do my final step, which is signing my artwork. You can sign with whatever color you'd like. And that finishes our masterpiece today. Thank you for joining me, Mercedes Pfab, at the Captured on Canvas studio. We'll see you next time on Picture This.